We are back in ordinary time, and this gospel passage about our Lord, basically it's at the start of his public ministry, and notice how it emphasizes that he taught as one having authority and not as the scribes. And when we think of the scribes, they're the ones who were well educated. In other words, they are the ones who ought to have taught with authority. On the other hand, from the human perspective, when they look at our Lord, well, he's just a carpenter, you know, he didn't have any formal education. How is it that he is able to speak with great authority? Now, of course, we know the answer, but they don't. And the other thing is that during our Lord's private life, in other words, before he begins his public ministry, he didn't really make any show of his great wisdom, of his authority, except maybe when he was 12 years old, when he stayed behind in the temple. So in other words, he probably was like kind of a quiet guy and didn't make any show of knowledge or intelligence. So it even contrasts more fully with his previous life, when all of a sudden he begins to speak with authority, and not just insofar as he's teaching the people, but also when it comes to casting out the demons. In other words, the demons obey his voice because his voice is one of authority. And of course, he has this authority because he is God incarnate, and he knows what the truth is. He proclaims the truth. And when it comes to exorcisms, you know, I had mentioned that normally when a person is under demonic influence or possessed, the demons want to prevent that person from coming to church and staying away from priests. They have an aversion to holy things, an aversion to prayer also. Now, in today's gospel reading, this individual is in the synagogue, so, you know, the holy place. You know, every town had its synagogue where people would go to read the scriptures and to be taught by the rabbi. So sometimes these individuals, well, they have an obligation to go to church, you know, as a customary thing. So there may be different reasons as to why they come to church, or in this case to the synagogue. But it's very often when they are in the presence of something very holy that they have an aversion, or the demons try to distract them from those holy things. This is why I say, you know, it's kind of odd. Like, I don't know if you've been listening, but very often when people's cell phones go off, it's like right at the consecration or just before communion. It happens other times too, but it seems more consistently to happen at those times. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's not coincidence. Maybe the demons are encouraging somebody to call you at that specific time to distract you from the holy things that are taking place in the Mass. So it's a good reminder to make sure our cell phones are turned off. So our Lord speaks with great authority. And when it comes to the Catholic Church, it's the most authoritative moral voice in the world. And yes, I think there's more corruption in the church now and more confusion. So it's almost as if the evil spirits are trying to diminish that sense of authority of the Catholic Church. So yes, that's happening today. And not only in regards to speaking out on moral issues, but also in regards to casting out demons. And one of the things that verifies that, you know, the Catholic Church is the most authoritative one in casting out demons. Sure, other people could do it in the name of Christ, or at least attempt to do it in the name of Christ. But when they make movies, it's like all of these exorcism movies where a priest casts out demons, where a person casts out demons, it's always a Catholic priest. Because even in the secular world, they understand that the Catholic priests, they're the ones who are experts. Now, it's not every Catholic priest who can do this, so one has to be trained to be an exorcist. Here in the Archdiocese of Toronto, we have 2 official exorcists. I don't know who they are. Most people don't know who they are. Their identity is kept secret simply because Toronto is a big city. And my understanding is that there are so many cases of people who are under demonic influence that, you know, these priests would just be swamped. So there's a process, you know, you have to talk to a priest, and he has to write down an account of everything you say. He has to send it to the Archdiocese, and then they contact the priest, and perhaps the person might get to see one of the exorcists. So there's a process that takes place. So this authority is primarily within the Catholic Church. Can the Catholic priests, cast out the demons the way that Christ did? Well, not exactly. So they point out that sometimes it's a process, it takes time, and one of the things that's required is for the person to reform their life. If they're doing sinful things or leading a sinful life, they need to change that, because that's an opening to the evil spirits. So you can't kind of open the door to the evil spirits and at the same time try to shut it. So you have to reform your life. And very often, having erroneous understanding of the scriptures, erroneous understandings of the faith, can also be an opening to evil spirits, because they are the source of all deceit, all falsehood, all lies. So it's the truth that sets us free, and all the truths of our faith which we are called to practice. So there's a process, and sometimes it's these things, but also sometimes the strength of the demons, how long they have possessed the individual. All of these things may make a difference in regards to how long this process may take. So our Lord did it instantaneously, just at his word, they would obey him. Whereas even in the Catholic Church, there's a kind of process, but nevertheless, the Catholic priests are the best at this, or the Catholic exorcist priests. And in regards to speaking with authority, when a human being speaks with authority, why is it that they're able to speak with authority? And one is that they have a good knowledge of what they're talking about. And it's not just in regards to the faith. We can think, for example, of a science teacher or a physics teacher, right? Why is a teacher able to speak with authority? Because they have mastered the topic. They understand the topic that they are teaching. So in order for us to speak with authority, having some level of understanding is very, very important. And not only understanding the truths of our faith when it comes to proclaiming our faith, but also the conviction that these things are true. So when, somebody speaks with authority about matters of the faith, it's because they know these things are true. They understand these things. They have studied these things, but they also believe these things. And the believing part, it's not just, oh yeah, I believe. It's not just an intellectual belief. It has to be a belief from the heart. In other words, I believe that prayer is powerful and effective. And I proclaim this to all of you. But the reason I believe it is because I practice it. I know I have to pray. If I don't pray, I don't receive the graces of God. My life is not as good if I don't pray. So sure, somebody could just say, oh, prayer is very important. But when we have that personal conviction, when we live the faith, then we speak with greater authority. But you see, the reality is that any of you can also proclaim the truth with great authority. Now, you may not have as deep as of an understanding of the faith as somebody who's studied theology like a priest, but still, if you grasp the essentials of your faith, the most important aspects of your faith, and you're living the faith to the best of your ability, and especially if you're trying to avoid sin, which means the grace of God is present within you, you could be a very effective proclaimer of the truth. In other words, you could speak with great authority. And even when it comes to casting out demons, like I've heard so many stories of people who were, oppressed by demons, but it's because they practiced the faith. They freed themselves. And sometimes they had friends who prayed for them and helped them. So we free ourselves from these demons and their influence by drawing close to Christ. And we draw close to Christ by avoiding sin in our lives, trying to grow in virtue, trying to grow in goodness, trying to grow in love of God. And so let us do this, not just for ourselves, but so that we can benefit those around us, and so that we, united, can be more effective as the Church of Christ in casting out the evils of society. So one of the reasons that there's so much evil in society today is because we, as Catholics, we've been negligent. We haven't done our job properly. We haven't proclaimed Christ as we should. We haven't spoken out against evil as we should. So let us seek to be the very best Christians that we can be, and hopefully with our united effort, we can change the course of world events.